Dragon Ball community celebrates 30 years of Dragon Ball being on television. On this video, I want to talk about the 10 things that the Dragon Ball anime did better than Dragon Ball Z. Hello there, beautiful friends from around the world. I'll be your host, Geekdom, and joining me on this video to count down 10 things the Dragon Ball anime did better than DBZ, please welcome Blackenfist.
It's good to be here, and I'm here to also bring my own thoughts and opinions.
Yes, indeed. Now, obviously, Blackenfist, as you and I have gone on record of saying many times, in the manga, in the original manga, there was no Dragon Ball Z. There's 42 volumes of the manga that came out in Shonen Jump from 84 to 95, and the series was changed to Dragon Ball Z only in the anime by Toei. But if you were to read the original manga, it's just Dragon Ball. So I want to specify that we're talking about 10 things that Dragon Ball the anime did better than Dragon Ball Z. So what is your number 5 or your first out of the 5 that you've got?
At number 5, I have the opening. Now, the opening for Dragon Ball is my definitive number 1 favorite opening in the entire franchise, whether I'm counting like openings to animes like Dragon Ball Z or GT or Super even, or whether I'm counting openings, animated 2D openings like the video games like most prominently, like maybe the Budokai 2, 3, Ultimate Tenkaichi also had one. But as an opening to anything, the first Dragon Ball opening is my favorite, not only in terms of the visuals, but the song itself. The song Mystical Adventure, Maka Fushigi Adventure, is definitively my favorite song in the entire franchise. I like it better than Hechala. I like it better than We Gotta Power. I like it better than Don Don. I like it better than any other video game theme, as much as I love those. This one takes the cake in my eyes.
And I love that song too, no question about it. I used to bump that song every single day in high school when I downloaded it from Vegito EX's links page way back. I
also have to say that in the Shinsuke Kikuchi soundtrack, there were many rearrangements and instrumentations of that song, and in Dragon Ball throughout the whole entire series. I believe that one of the very few last times that that song was used,
first two movies, yes.
Yeah, there was like some sort of rearrangement, but that song, even Shinsuke Kikuchi did great things with that theme song. I pretty much love all the rearrangements and little instrumentations that Shinsuke Kikuchi did with that theme song. So that theme song just sticks out so much, not only as a song, but throughout the whole soundtrack.
It is legendary without question. Now, my number 5 of the 10 things that Dragon Ball did better than DBZ is less plot holes and inconsistencies. I felt that even though Dragon Ball does have plot holes no matter what, even in the manga, I felt that by the time we got to the Z portion, with the added filler arcs and with the added I guess anime-only extras, they added more contradictions and more plot holes. I feel like Dragon Ball is a much tighter story without Z in there. I feel like, and we'll get to more about the arc later on, but I feel like the story had less room for error, so to speak, and I felt like Toriyama, especially when we got to the Buu Saga where the power scaling was totally out of whack, I felt that everything in Dragon Ball, for the most part, actually made a lot of sense. I think DBZ kind of became more about the moments than about the actual story. So what is your number 4?
My number 4 has to go to the training. Now, there was some, the training at Dragon Ball could be lackluster at some times, and of course there was awesome training in Dragon Ball Z, of course. But the reason I really pick training in this spot, and the reason I think the Dragon Ball training is better, is because it's just more creative. Too many times in Dragon Ball Z, the training was shoved off aside. It was something that got in the way of telling the story. It was probably one of the biggest examples of this was the hyperbolic time chamber Room of Spirit and Time, because in that whole instance, it was a way to really speed up training and shove it aside. Even though we got glimpses into how that training went, a lot of times it was done off screen. A lot of times the training was shoved aside. While in Dragon Ball, the two most prominent examples I want to give is, of course, the Master Roshi training that Goku and Krillin received in the beginning of the series, which was incredibly creative, doing their milk run, them just doing menial tasks, channeling a little bit of Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid there. But also, I also have to say, probably my favorite training sequence in the entire series is, as in Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z, this is my favorite training in everything, has to be when Goku went up to Kami's lookout for the very first time and was trained by Mr. Popo. That training was incredible. It was not only creative, he did so many unique things in that training. It was part of the story. It was part of his growth. It was not something that was just brushed aside, but it really gave Goku just so much more depth into what the character he was going to become, to the kind of strength that he would possess. And I just have to say that for the most part, the Dragon Ball training was more part of the story. It was more intrinsic, and it was not as brushed over as it sometimes would be in Z. Now, of course, becoming stronger in Dragon Ball sometimes was being brushed over a little bit, like, for instance, Goku drinking that super holy water in the Demon King Piccolo arc. But for the most part, Dragon Ball did make training more in part of the series.
I agree with you. The Roshi training and the Popo training are probably the two best examples of training in the whole series, in my opinion, better than Z. I completely agree. My number 4 goes along with that one. Emphasis on spiritualism and mysticism. I felt like Dragon Ball Z, Toriyama took all of the concepts from Dragon Ball and essentially made them into sci-fi. Goku being a monkey boy, Demon King Piccolo being a demon, the concept of God having to release his demonic force from inside of him, Goku having to climb Karin Tower. All of these things were great moments in Dragon Ball. And in Dragon Ball Z, a lot of them are explained through sci-fi. Well, Goku's an alien, Piccolo's an alien, they go into space. I think Dragon Ball, not just with the training that Goku did with Kami, with Karin, with all the people, and Roshi, learning how to manipulate his ki, learning life lessons in all the tournaments, which we're going to get to soon. I felt like with Dragon Ball Z, Toriyama tried to make it all sci-fi and give everything an explanation, whereas I like the mysticism and the spirituality of Dragon Ball. I think it felt more like the series had more of a genuine sense of adventure. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is comedy. Now, there are hilarious moments in both, but I think that it goes without a doubt that in my mind, the comedy in Dragon Ball far surpassed Dragon Ball Z, and of course it makes sense, as Dragon Ball is a little bit more lighthearted, and honestly, also with a lot of the comedy also has to do with one character in particular, which is Master Roshi. Now, Master Roshi lost prominence throughout the series, and of course, when you get rid of a funny character such as that, your whole series is going to become less funny. But I felt that the comedy and just the funny moments, even in the first arc, like with even Kid Goku, Goku himself was a funny character with his whole little pat, or the infamous "you have no balls" scene, just crazy antics, of course, with Master Roshi. One of the funniest moments I can remember was in the Red Ribbon Army arc, Master Roshi taking control of this camera that Bulma made to keep an eye on Goku, and him thinking that he was spying on him thinking that he was spying on a lady taking her clothes off, when he only discovers it was a guy taking a shit and then him throwing up. I mean, that kind of stuff, you just don't see that kind of stuff in Dragon Ball. The closest it ever got to that in Dragon Ball Z was in that whole Garlic Jr. arc with Marin and everything, and then Chi-Chi showing up. I mean, that was also a hilarious moment, too. But
what about when Roshi shrank himself?
Oh, there's just so many moments. There's Roshi shrank himself.
Oh, when Bulma's shirt was lifted and he had the nosebleed that covered the invisible guy?
Yeah, of course. And then there's, of course, when Bulma lifted up her to show up her panties, but she didn't even realize what she actually was showing. Or Emperor Pilaf. Oh my gosh,
he's hilarious.
How could I forget Emperor Pilaf? Emperor Pilaf, probably one of the, in my mind, the best comedic villain in the entire series. Just how he tortures his villains, and tortures his henchmen, for the slightest offense, like them, him farting and then blaming it on Shu, and then electrocuting him or threatening to chop his limbs off. I mean, stuff like that. It just makes that's part of that section of the series a lot more funny, in my opinion.
I agree with you completely. My number 3 is the tournaments. One thing I loved about Dragon Ball is you had 3 Tenkaichi Budokais, and unlike Dragon Ball Z, where you had basically the Cell game and you had the Buu Saga tournament, which had no real finish except for like the 18 Mr. Satan bribery thing, the tournaments in Dragon Ball felt like a big deal. Toriyama used them not only to cap off the arcs and to introduce the next arcs, but also he used them to build development with Goku and his friends. The first tournament ends with Goku facing off against his master, who was in disguise, losing the fight barely because Roshi was very, very, very tired, and he you know, it could have gone to anybody, but Roshi did get the win because he's older and wiser, and learning the lesson that, you know, there's always somebody better. Then the 22nd tournament, you had the redemption of Ten Shinhan, which we're going to get to later on in this video, and also the whole rival schools thing where one of Roshi's former schoolmates or, you know, trainees or partners or whatever has his own school, the Crane Master, and you had the turtle versus the crane, and you had like Yamcha, Krillin, Goku versus Ten Shinhan and Chaozu. Just amazing stuff. And then of course,
I mean, Goku got married at a tournament.
yeah, the 23rd tournament. I was going to get to it, where you have, you know, you have a tournament where Goku wants to be the heavyweight champion of the world, but you've also got Piccolo there, who not only wants to become the champ, but wants to rule the world and kill Goku. So there's a whole like looming atmosphere over it. I think that Dragon Ball Z was really lacking, I feel, with that whole, you know, kind of concise, structured tournament, I guess structure. What is your favorite tournament?
That is a really tough question, and to put me on the spot
They're
like
all
that,
awesome.
I mean, they're all amazing tournaments. I mean, if I really had to press me on that, it probably had to be between the 21st or the 23rd. I'd probably go toward the 21st, but they're all amazing, and maybe if I give it more thought, I might change my mind, but they're all amazing arcs in my opinion.
Yeah, and I also feel like the tournaments also allow the characters to actually have unique techniques. I thought Dragon Ball Z later on emphasized way too much on like ki blasts and mountains blowing up, whereas in Dragon Ball, you had Giran with the Guru Guru gum, you had Bacterium with the bad smell, you had Yam, you had all these characters that essentially had their own kind of techniques, and they were unique and creative, but it wasn't all about ki blast. It just felt more like a real fight. Just go back and watch those tournaments, folks. What is your number 2?